Project Assisted Migration. With this new job, I've been working harder than ever trying to understand why climate change was so damaging to some, yet proving to be beneficial to others. Being a marine biologist specifically and having a love for animals, I spent months researching and testing on other species to find out how they're doing. As of now, my main tests revolve around scyphozoans and anthozoans. Scyphozoans are what is considered as true jellyfish, while an anthozoan are sea anemones. The one in specific would be coral. My studies as of now only consist on watching how differently they lived under the same circumstances. Studying my scyphozoans, I noticed that over time their kind sees more of a success under the changes brought along by climate change. The rise in temperature, ocean acidification, and an increase in sea levels allow Hali and many other species like them a great environment to repopulate in. Although it provides them good, many others endure suffering like the anthozoans, but also many other species which include scyphozoans prey. Unlike a scyphozoan, anthozoans nearly die with a change in their marine ecosystem. The new change brings an excessive amount of stress, causing the loss of their vibrant colors, also known as bleaching. Many anthozoans lose their progress and slowly decline to their inevitable death. Simply observing the way one species can thrive with change while the other dies puts an unexplainable sort of pain in my body that I can't describe. Because of this, I've decided to work on a project that could save the species I always care for, while also providing another species the life that they've deserved without reaping the consequences that environment provides to the prey they feed on. This project has been called Project Prototype Assisted Migration, or AM for short. It'll provide the species I'm working with the chance at a new life, being moved to a new environment that'll benefit them in ways that the current ocean could not provide. When I was younger, I always wanted to help marine animals, and with the upcoming prototype AM, that dream has never been so close. Undulating around the Atlantic Ocean has always been so simple for a scyphozoan, or what can be considered as a true jellyfish. Their movement consists of rhythm that allow them to become dependent on the waves and its current. When hunting prey, it will use their tentacles to sting their food, paralyzing them before consuming their food until the jellyfish is satisfied. Throughout times, this recurring lifestyle has been spotted more often with the increase of scyphozoans. Many other marine species have noticed a steady increase in the population while their own have started to decrease. Many scyphozoans have yet to consider the reality of this situation, but one in particular is starting to notice. Although Hali follows the current like the rest of the species, she often loses her way and finds herself visiting smaller ecosystems in the hydrosphere. One day, she landed around a coral reef, noticing the lack of variety and the vibrancy of colors. Normally, Hali would notice the vibrant colors, but now that color has faded. Their colors were more diluted than the others around them, essentially making them stand out despite the lack of their best attribute. One in particular had little to no color, and although a scyphozoan had no brain, they have the ability to understand when something is not the way it should be. Hali noticed that some of them were dying, but couldn't make sense of what brought them to their death. Following the interaction, for a day she's seen a small decrease in different species that have always been spotted. The decrease isn't necessarily noticeable to others, but is starting to become noticeable to her. As ocean temperatures rise along with the ocean acidification, Hali believes the problem for the species she saw may be the cause of it. She just can't comprehend why many marine species suffer from the change being created, but her species are handling the change completely fine. In fact, their species can be seen benefiting from this change, with Hali noticing the subtle increase of their species yet the decrease in others. She decided to test it out. As she felt the temperature rise, she would go visit the coral reefs to see how their appearance changed. This would not be done overnight, but she would be eager to find out what is going on in her ecosystem. After months of working among other marine biologists, the first version of Prototype AM is ultimately complete. Although this is the first draft, my group is quite confident in how well it'll perform. The prototype will help with the assisted migration of anthozoans suffering from the stress of climate change and bleaching because of it. They'll be placed in an aquarium specifically designed for their needs, allowing them to live safely in an environment meant for them. As for the scyphozoans, we'll be provided a few to further study how they would react to a different environment from what they're currently living in. Currently, myself and my teammates are testing it out on 3-dimensional replicas of what specimens would be moving. Of course, it doesn't replicate the actual experiment, but will provide satisfactory answers and also help recognize if there are any defects before the project goes into full effect. As of now, the prototype still has some malfunctions related to our economic situation, only allowing us to test on a small group of species at a time. But that isn't a current problem to me or my team. In fact, the biggest problem is actually finding the Anthozoa species that I've been studying, which are the ones in the process of bleaching. I also have to discover where the Scyphozoans can handle the move to an environment that contrasts the one they live in. It shouldn't take long to find them due to prior research on where they currently lived, but now I have to wait for approval to officially start the assisted migration. With the temperature rising, Holly is sure it's creating a problem for other animals living around her. Every time she strays away from the current, she floats towards the colony of coral she met before. By every visit, the coral loses their color and one among many soon turns white, representing the species embracing death. It was only noticeable that it would ruin other things in the environment if it got worse. If the water started to warm more than it already did, other animals that were better at handling change would inevitably suffer as well. Not only would the temperature rising, their habitat would become more acidic, which is also a harmful factor for people that cannot handle this change. Although this is happening, Holly and the rest of her species still thrived. She thought it would be like this forever with the factors of the ocean continuing to change. Her kind would still continue up the steady increase of their population. This is what she believed until the food and anything else Holly relied on to survive started to slowly disappear. That meant the food supply would slowly disappear and harm her species, having little to no food to consume anymore. Without food, her species would grow weak. Their pose became inconsistent, and for some it may stop completely. Slowly, Holly's population would start to burn as fast as it came to light. The thought of dying due to the decrease in her own food scared her. She knew that leaving her environment would be best for her, but would she be able to find shelter if there's a possibility that this problem is happening ocean-wide? After being approved for Prototype AM, my group was also given the go to gather the specimen that I did research on. I've been allowed to gather 16 animals for the first experiment, splitting the amount of Anthozoans and Scyphozoans evenly when put inside their aquarium. It took at least 2 months to find exactly where the subjects were living, but when I did, I couldn't have been more disappointed. Finally discovering the Anthozoan colony, I realized that some had already suffered through bleaching, even witnessing the result of death. I wish I could have done more sooner to make this preventable, but now stopping the pain for certain animals will be enough. I took some that were currently in the process of bleaching and others that have not started yet to see how they would both react. As for Scyphozoans, it was easier to find subjects because of how their population swiftly increased. I quickly found 8 jellyfish that were best fit for the experiment, and now I could return to my lab to confirm the animals' presence and finish the project. The team moved both of the animals along with a large amount of water so they will not be stressed due to moving to a new environment. Without the water from their homeland, it will cause more stress to the species than the amount of stress they've already suffered from when they were in their original homes. Now that I've made it back to the lab, I can see that my teammates have finished the final details of both environments. I start to slowly move each species into their assigned habitat. Currently, I only have to watch how the species react to the new environment now that the rest of the project has been completed. For the next 6 months, we'll be observing both the Scyphozoans and Anthozoans to see how my project will go into full effect, watching it in hopes of being able to help future generations of species if this prototype works successfully. The temperature and acidification of the ocean has been getting worse, ruining many lives for the aquatic species. Holly specifically has yet to end up being affected by it, but she's seen a few of her peers be affected by it. While being dependent on the waves, she purposely goes astray to visit the coral reef she's been visiting previously. Yet when she goes to visit the colony, she notices that it's rather empty, with many spots being vacant. It's as if some of the coral were removed from their colonies. Suddenly, Holly feels like she's being picked up and moved from one place to another against her will. She cannot see where she's going, but she realizes she's being moved away from one place she once called home. Soon, she's inside a new environment that doesn't necessarily look like her home, but still feels like it. She's amongst a few others of her own species and given necessities that could fulfill her greatest desires. Here she does not have to worry about food supplies or other items needed for her survival decreasing. Instead, she can live a life free from worry and float around as so she desires. Now that it's been 6 months, I've noticed that the prototype has successfully completed its job without causing any more possible stress or suffering to my subjects. The anthozoans have not bleached any further, and cyphozoans can live freely without worrying about the decrease in supplies that are beneficial to their life. Moving forward, the team has been given approval to help other species that are suffering from the same result of climate change that is currently impacting the ocean and aquatic animals that live inside of it. Having my project this successful encouraged me to expand research and help other animals that suffered due to climate change. Now my dream of helping marine animals that suffered has finally been accomplished.